Thanks for joining us for another Kickstarter conniption. Today we're looking at Nova Lux from Dragon Egg Games.
As always, we want to make you aware that our Kickstarter conniption videos are sponsored in part by our Kickstarter backers and by the creators of this game. Thanks for joining us again at Tantrum House Studio 3. I'm Will Meadows.
And I'm Sarah Meadows, and today we're doing a preview of Nova Lux from Dragon Egg Games. This is from designer Max Robbins.
This is a 1 to 6 player resource management set collection game that takes about 60 to 90 minutes to play. Dragon Egg Games is kind enough to send us a prototype copy to check out, so let's take a look at how it's played.
To set up the game, create a 4x4 grid of star cards.
Roll the dice to determine coordinates of cards to flip over for your player count.
Then place a red giant card on top of each face down card, and then place a yellow star card on top of those cards, and then add a hydrogen marker to each.
Give each player their resource mat and tokens, and then deal 4 faction cards to each player.
Faction cards are drafted until every player has 3. They are then revealed above everyone's mat, and then you're ready to begin your space quest.
Each turn, players get 4 types of actions they can take. They may move around the board by spending hydrogen.
They may harvest the resources on the star they are located on.
To harvest, the hydrogen marker is moved 1 digit, and the player must pay the cost shown at the top of the tile.
So here it costs 1 artifact to gain 2 botanical oxygens and then hydrogen from the star. They may take this action as many times as they would like, as long as they can afford it.
If they use up the last hydrogen marker on the star, it is burned out and they claim the star as their own, which will allow them to begin activating their own biosphere engine.
Players may also use their faction actions. These allow players to do things like swap resources for another, or even gain a resource when another player does so.
After their 4 primary actions, the player must then remove 1 hydrogen from any star in the galaxy. If they remove the final hydrogen, the planet is harvested like normal.
Once players have at least 7 of each resource, they may build a colony. And once their colony is built, they may begin working to fulfill the requirements of a faction card.
When a faction goal is completed, it is flipped over and the faction has been established.
The player to establish all 3 of their factions first wins.
In Nova Lux, players act as the head of a newly established federation. They're pulling in factions, different species of aliens that they'll be trying to build a future biosphere with. They'll be traveling around the vastness of space trying to collect the necessary resources in order to build that new biosphere community. And once they're able to satisfy the needs of all 3 of their faction members, they'll win the game.
Yes, in the game you'll get 4 different actions, and you can take those actions when you do it as many times as you can afford. So when you're harvesting, you can harvest 3, 4, 5 times if the star has allowed that many times that are left. There's that hydrogen marker that will count down the resources that are still available, and then once it's depleted, that star collapses and you can add that to your own area, and then you can activate another action, which is the biosphere engine action.
And those are sometimes really powerful because once you've collected that tile, you can now have it as your own personal use device. And so once you've gotten 2 or 3 stars that have collapsed, you can pick what you want to do on your turn. That sometimes will allow you to really ramp up your production of resources in the game. The game definitely has some spatial awareness. Like, you look at the board and you can kind of determine, you need to determine what combination of stars next to each other will allow me to rack up these resources as fast as possible.
Yes, and to even establish one of your factions, you'll need to have your colony in place first, and to do that you'll have to have all of your resources of at least 7 or higher on your mat. And sometimes it's a little difficult to plan out getting those resources because most of the time you'll need to pay one to gain another one. So planning out moving back and forth those resources on your mat and getting them all above 7 is sometimes a challenge depending on where you are on the galaxy map.
As you exhaust the hydrogen on each of these stars, they then turn into a red giant, so you remove that card entirely. Once you drain the second set of hydrogen off, then it's kind of a mystery what you're going to get. Are you going to end up in a black hole where you've got to spend a bunch of hydrogen to escape? Some of them will be like teleports that allow you to move around space in different ways. You can very easily get like kind of trapped in a corner where you've got to spend tons of hydrogen to be able to get anywhere. So you got to be really smart about when you decide to burn it out. Being able to burn out a star on another player's turn is also interesting sometimes. So you've got some fun choices to make when you're playing the game.
Yeah, we didn't mention that you can, if you're on the same space as another player, you can attack them or trade with them. So if you do an attack, you have the 2 dice, you'll each take one and roll, and then you'll add whatever your lowest resource is. So not having resources down at 0 could be helpful in the game when you're doing those attacks.
Or it can be hurtful, yeah. You attack the guy who has a bunch of resources, but he's left one at 0. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the game. As you get a larger player count, obviously there's even more going on in the game because you're fighting over those resources. You're more likely to bump into each other. A lot of really fun stuff going on in the game. The artwork for it, we're obviously looking at prototype components, so I'm assuming some of the tokens and things will be probably upgraded, so be sure to check out their campaign for that. The art style itself was a lot of fun, though. I felt like it was a very rich, there's a lot of purples and crazy colors that made it feel like this mysterious alien species type of thing that was going on.
Yeah, if this sounds like something you're interested in, you can check out their Kickstarter campaign from Dragon Egg Games. And then thank you again for checking us out here and subscribing to Tantrum House.
Nope, sorry. Wrong sci-fi.
I can actually read it from over there because I have my contacts in.
What? You can see!
I could see today.
Satisfy the needs of your 3 factions in order to build a future habitat community.
Biosphere.
Biosphere. Biosphere? Is that really what to build a successful
An ecosystem.
ecosystem.